Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. The Liberal government's GST holiday begins this Saturday. Is it a welcome break or a fiscal headache? We'll talk to Liberal MP Taleeb Noor Mohammed up first, and you can call in. Let us know, will these mean big savings for you? Does it address affordability? In half an hour, the holidays can be full of merriment, but can also be difficult for people living with dementia, as well as their families. We'll talk to two caregivers, and we'll ask you, what supports do patients and their families need, and how do you navigate the holiday season while caring for a loved one? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Come Saturday, the much-touted GST holiday begins and will run through to the day after Valentine's Day. The Liberal government announced the tax break late last month. It will apply to prepared foods and snacks, restaurant meals, children's toys and clothes, car seats and diapers, books, print, newspapers and puzzles, as well as Christmas trees. The government says the policy will alleviate affordability pressures for Canadians, but the tax break has faced mixed reviews. Restaurants say it will help boost business in the slow season after the holidays, but some business groups say it's confusing to implement at their register and causes undue stress and more expenses for them. It's been panned by some economists as poor policy as well. Now we're asking you, is the GST holiday a welcome break or a fiscal headache? Will it address affordability? If you're a small business, let us know if you are ready for this tax break that begins Saturday, December 14th. You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm joined now by Taleeb Noor Mohammed. He's a Liberal MP for Vancouver Granville, and he joins us from Ottawa. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Happy to be here. Good afternoon.
Now, this policy has been criticized as hastily put together, populist, and electioneering. And what do you say to that?
Look, we all know that the holidays are always a time that families face a little bit of a crunch. It's been a difficult time for Canadians, and we also know that as you pointed out in your opening, that the following 2 months are a challenging time, not just for restaurants but also for retailers. And so this is a chance to put money back in the pockets of Canadians to help support small business, but most importantly, to just reduce the burden a little bit. We can't change prices for folks, but we know that we can help put more money back in their pockets, and that's exactly what this intends to do.
Why was it announced so late?
When you're talking about putting together solutions in a minority parliament, you have to ask yourself what will work and how do you work with others to get this over the finish line. And this is something that we announced well in advance, over almost a month before the holidays, to give people time, but also more importantly to help people plan. And it's a targeted measure. It's going to help deliver $1.6 billion in tax relief to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And in our communities, it's going to make a big difference to small businesses that are going to be looking to bring folks through the door during the slowest period.
Some small businesses, though, have said, including the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, have said this is just a kind of administrative nightmare. It's going to add to their costs. They're seeking rebates to deal with that. And they find it confusing in terms of what products are actually going to be exempt and what won't be exempt. Is that month, has that been enough time for them to prepare?
Well, the Retail Council of Canada has come out in support of this. They noted that it's a really important way to stimulate business for retailers. We've heard from restaurants who have pointed out this is going to help them, and we've also set up through the CRA a line for businesses that are struggling with this to be able to help them ensure that they are moving things in the right way. But make no mistake, this is really about all of us coming together to help one another out at a difficult time. And I've spoken to retailers and to restaurants in Vancouver Granville who are really excited about this because they know it's going to make a difference, not just for their businesses, but it's going to make life a little bit more affordable for the customers that come through their doors.
What difference will that 5% really make for consumers?
I think that is something that consumers need to answer. Anytime that you can give folks a little bit more money in their pocket, it makes a big difference. Look, things like diapers and car seats are expensive, and when you're talking about having to entertain during the holidays or buy Christmas presents, every little bit helps. And the folks that I've spoken to, for them, this is going to make a big difference. And that's how we have to look at this. 5% for folks makes a big difference when you think about how things add up during the holidays.
But When you look at the broader problem of affordability, is this not just a drop in the bucket? I mean, what is your government actually doing to address affordability?
I'm really glad you asked that question. If you think about the things that our government has done to address affordability, whether it is the Canada Child Benefit, whether it is $10 a day childcare, whether it is dental care, whether it is pharmacare, these are all measures that our government has taken to increase affordability. And it's every measure, by the way, that the Conservatives have opposed. They have voted against every single one of those measures that have a meaningful impact on the cost of living and on affordability for Canadians. And with good fiscal management, which is exactly what you have seen under this government, you are now seeing interest rates drop faster than any other country in the G7. You're seeing the fastest growing economy next year in the G7. And we have the best debt to GDP ratio. These are factors that allow us to make decisions like this. And not every G20 country can afford to take a $1.6 billion write down on taxes because they haven't been able to manage their books as well as Canada has. It's because we've done that we can actually do things like this.
And regarding the debt to GDP ratio, that is something that Chrystia Freeland has, the finance minister, has guaranteed. But in response to questions today about the deficit and that pledge to keep the budget deficit at 40.1 billion in the previous fiscal year, she has not committed to that. And we'll find out, I suppose, when she gives her fall economic update. When you talk about the interest rates, that is as a result of slowing inflation. Some economists have criticized this policy, the GST tax break, as something that could be inflationary in that it will encourage more spending in that short amount of time while the supply isn't increased. So why create a policy that could contribute to more inflation following its implementation?
Well, I mean, I think that is, again, speculation on the part of some economists, and we leave it to the Bank of Canada to make those decisions. If the Bank of Canada were concerned, look, they have the opportunity. There's going to be a rate cut tomorrow. We are hearing that it might be a larger than expected rate cut. That remains to be seen. Our job is to make sure that the economy is well managed, and it is within the construct of a well managed economy that you are then able to take steps like this. And it is again important for Canadians to. It's important for us to look at the economy that we have in this country and the debt to GDP ratios and the deficits relative to other G7 and G20 nations. But that doesn't help Canadians when it comes to increasing affordability. And our job is to make sure that if the fiscal frame is correct, if we are doing relative to others in this world, then we can afford to take those measures and make those steps that allow affordability measures to come into place to help Canadians.
Can your government afford an up to $2.7 billion loss in revenue, according to the parliamentary budget officer?
Well, every step that we have taken is in line with ensuring fiscal prudence and fiscal responsibility. We wouldn't have taken this step if we didn't believe that we could manage the reductions in revenue. And again, this is exactly part of when you look at the holistic picture of managing the economy, as we have done well for the last number of years. You don't take these steps unless you know that you have the fiscal strength to be able to do it.
One last question. If this is such good policy, why not make it permanent?
I think, as we have noted, this is a period in time where we are looking at a specific period of time for the holidays to reduce the burden during slow months, and we are always looking at ways to make life more affordable for Canadians. This is a specific targeted measure, and there are ongoing conversations about how to increase affordability for Canadians over the course of the next few months and into the future.
Mr. Noor Mohammed, I know you have to head back into the House. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Taleeb Noor Mohammed is Liberal MP for Vancouver Granville. And we are taking your calls on this. Is the upcoming GST holiday a welcome break or a fiscal headache? Do you think it will address affordability issues? And if you are a small business, we'd like to hear from you as well in terms of how prepared you are to make those changes for the upcoming weekend. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, UBC Okanagan economics professor Ross Hickey talked about some of that criticism on the holiday tax break. He spoke this morning to CBC's Stephen Quinn.
GST is a value-added tax, which means that vendors who pay tax on inputs can collect a rebate on the tax that they've paid. So, for example, if a restaurant is selling wine to patrons, they purchase the wine and they may have paid GST on the purchase, but they can submit the receipts for that GST that they've paid on the wine that they bought and get a rebate back from the government. So they don't pass on that tax that they've paid, that GST that they've paid, they don't pass that on to the final consumer of the wine who buys the glass of wine in the restaurant.
Okay.
So that's what makes it complicated is that, you see, now there's a incentive to just kind of strategically time the purchases of these goods for businesses. Really, what we should be doing is using the GST relatively more. But over the last 20 years, we've actually cut the GST from 7% to 6% and now 5%. We're going in the wrong direction. And what that means is that some of the burden of raising revenue is falling on other tax bases, like income tax, personal and corporate. And that's not the best way to raise revenue in our economy. If you think about what this tax holiday with the GST was about, it was supposed to relieve the pressures on low-income households. They could have done that with checks to low-income households, but instead they did this tax holiday for the GST, which really is not a holiday at all. I mean, it's not like our creditors that are lending the federal government money are going to stop charging interest over the holidays, right?
Well, they would tell you this is aimed at working Canadians. No G, working Canadians.
Yeah. I mean, who's getting worked over right now is the public. Like I said, we need to appreciate good taxes. The good taxes are better than worse taxes. No one loves taxes, but I mean, of all the taxes we have, the GST is the only one that I would put on a shirt with a heart around it.
That's UBC Okanagan economics professor Ross Hickey. And Sal is calling us from Delta. Hi there, Sal.
1 spoon of honey, measure it, please.
Sal, it sounds like you're going through the drive-through right now.
Okay, I'm done.
You're done. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a good order?
Well, would you like me to come by and drop it off?
No, that's just fine. Okay, we got you at an opportune time, but let me know what you think of this GST holiday.
Well, I think, first of all, it's a good thing, not a bad thing, because it's going to save money for the consumers. And it comes at a time when people are still hurting, and holiday is a time when, people spend more money. So this gives a little bit more of a break to the consumers.
Okay.
And also, the other thing, of course, is the complications that people are gonna have. That they're gonna have as far as the sleeves are concerned. Like what do you call? As far as the businesses are going to have to make adjustment to their computers and to cash registers and stuff like that. And I think the government should have actually considered that, and also giving them some kind of a relief when it comes to looking at these expenses, because they're going to have a headache.
Saul, thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch. That's Saul calling us from Delta. Michael is our next caller now, asking you what your thoughts are on the upcoming GST holiday. It comes into play this Saturday and runs until February 15th, 2025. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. And what are your thoughts on this?
The main thing I keep hearing is the concern about the change for businesses having to change prices and adjust things. And I've worked in both retail, restaurant, and I run my own business at a farm. And I can tell you it takes 15 minutes to change the tax over on a computer and any POS system, including a touch.
It's not that complicated.
Phone. It's really not that complicated. And almost every price on the shelf that would be affected, say at a liquor store or private retailer, is usually pre-tax. So the consumer would just see a lower price on their bill when they leave instead of the higher price that is reflected.
Can consumers rely on that happening?
Well, it's going to be basically mandated by the government that the tax not be collected. So I guess that's a curious question. The other comment would be the UBC, was it UBC professor?
That's right.
That they should just mail a check out instead.
If you want to address affordability.
Yeah, well, nobody ever recognizes the government for mailing a check out. we all get checks in the mail from the government once or twice a year, provincially here in BC, and like an ICBC rebate or
Right.
whatever, and it just goes directly into your bank account. I think people have noticed the difference at the till, so I think they made a better decision with this.
And you're a business owner, or you have been, Michael. What do you make of the thought that we've heard from groups like Restaurants Canada saying this could actually get, motivate people to come and frequent their business during a slower time?
I think that's what we'll see, and especially the part that carries over to the new year, because we all get a lot of business in December, but the January part is when everybody hurts. So if restaurants see a boom, I used to run restaurants for 25 years, so I know what it's like in January, and I live on the island.
We know the campaigns that run in January to try to get you to eat out. Michael, good to hear from you in Duncan. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye. Our numbers again, if you want to weigh in, asking you regarding the upcoming GST holiday, is it a welcome break or a fiscal headache? That's saying we're hearing the word headache from some small businesses saying, and some groups representing small businesses saying this is very complicated for them to implement in a short period of time. The Liberal government, as you've just heard, says this is an affordability measure that comes at a time when people are struggling, and it comes at a time when you have more expenses as well. So we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca, and we have a lot of emails coming in. James writes, as a low-income senior, the GST does nothing for me because other than essentials that have no GST anyway, I don't buy anything that is unnecessary. Seniors need to have OAS, not just a supplement. They need them to be raised significantly, and the feds need to make a section to claim rent on income tax. And that's the case. Basic groceries, things like produce and milk, are already exempt from taxes. And so this GST break would apply to those foods that are not already exempt from the GST, things like snacks and packaged foods. Let's take another call here. Sandra is on the line in Chilliwack. Hi, Sandra.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for calling. What are your thoughts on this GST holiday?
But it's not. That's my concern. If it were a GST vacation or holiday, GST would be eliminated on everything we buy. It's only eliminated on a few minor items. And so it's a joke and a waste of time.
What would you like it to apply to?
Everything. Everything we currently pay GST on, apply GST right across the board. Everything.
Okay. All right. So it's too specific for you then?
Well, it's useless. Who buys junk food anymore? I don't know. You shouldn't be buying junk food. And what you save 50 cents on a deli chicken, big deal. Who buys deli chicken? It's only good
but
because
car seats, Christmas trees,
clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
car seats, Christmas trees, clothing for kids.
I'm sorry. It's just way too specific to be useful. It's really a waste of time.
Sandra, great to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Sandra in Chilliwack. William is on the line in Vancouver. Hi, William.
Hello.
Yes, what are your thoughts? Is it a welcome break or just a headache?
Well, I think it's a headache for those people that have to administer it, but it was the governments in the past that have put all these taxes on essentials, and they should have been put on. Taxing people so they can eat food, that's just disgusting.
Basic foods are already exempt, though, right? Have been exempt.
I don't know about what you call
produce
basic.
And milk. Yeah, right. It's what you consider basic, right? Well, we just heard from Sandra, who said, you shouldn't be eating junk food anyway.
Yeah, I'm talking about fruits, vegetables, meat, milk, all that stuff that you get at a grocery store that we all go to. There's all sorts of them around, but owned by people that make tons of money off People with the cost of groceries have gone crazy.
Okay, so just you raise an interesting point there, William, because yes, while those items, in fact, my understanding is they are exempt from tax already, milk, produce, but is the real problem the cost of groceries themselves rather than the tax on top on some items?
Well, when you add the tax on top of the groceries, how high they are, the tax, you're paying more in tax.
Okay. William, thank you very much. I really want to squeeze in Keith in Vernon because Keith is another business owner. Hi, Keith.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for calling. What are your thoughts?
Well, it was just a response to the fellow that said, "Oh, it's a 15-minute change." I mean, that got my a burr under my saddle. It is not a 15-minute change, and any business owner would tell you it's not. It's much more complicated than that. There's all sorts of items. We have to go through every item in the store. Yeah, we can run a report and this and that, but it's a lot of work for not a lot of money, and then we got to reverse it all in 2 months.
Right. What kind of business do you run, Keith?
It's a gas bar convenience store.
Okay, so kind of retailer. Are you ready for Saturday?
Oh, yeah, we will be. No, not yet. No, we're not. We're just, we're under the gun. We're getting there. We're going to be ready by Friday night. Hopefully, we're getting, I won't tell you who I work for, but they have to download an EXE file, and we can't do it till after Friday night, after we close.
Right.
And we're crossing our fingers that it's going to work Saturday morning. And anyway, long story short, it's a very convoluted, and it would have been. I agree with the other fellow there. Just no check.
Keith, thank you so much for the call from Vernon. Glad we got to hear from you. You can keep emailing us on this, bctoday@cbc.ca. It is now 12:28. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television. We're live streaming as well. You can catch us online on our YouTube page, CBC British Columbia, or on our streaming service, also called CBC British Columbia. You can catch us on our website too, cbc.ca/BC. Well, thank you to all of you who donated to CBC British Columbia's Make the Season Kind campaign. It has raised more than $1.5 million for BC Food Banks, for Food Banks BC. We had a real blast on Friday, bringing you special programming. Lovely to speak with actors from Schitt's Creek, from Allegiance, and we got to speak with someone who made her own Taylor Swift outfit. It took her months. It was incredibly detailed and stunning. Yes, of course, this coincided with the last shows of the Eras Tour, and Taylor Swift was in town. She came, she conquered, but we also did some programming to highlight that, as well as fundraising for Food Banks BC, 3 hours outside the CBC building. Shout out to the team who put the show together, and of course, my fabulous co-host, Margaret Gallagher. And thank you to our audience who came to see us. All of this, of course, to raise money for 110 food banks around the province. You can still donate, in fact. Just go to cbc.ca/kindbc, cbc.ca/kindbc. Thank you so much for making the season kind. Right now, we're at $1.5 million raised for Food Banks BC. One last email here from Chris. This, quote, holiday doesn't engender confidence in the competency of our government. Important essentials such as food and some clothing are already GST exempt. In fact, GST is a very fair form of taxation because the more you consume, the more tax you pay. So it's preferentially a tax on those of us who are better off. The Conservatives initially brought in the GST, but they also were the ones who reduced it to 5%. Again, trying to buy votes. Apparently, no party is exempt from this nonsense. The current move screams panic since it's so hasty and poorly managed. Chris, thank you. BC Today at cbc.ca for more of your thoughts on the GST holiday and anything you hear on the program. And coming up, we'll have a discussion around a difficult time, real challenging time for people with dementia and their caregivers. The holidays, they can be a lot of joy and a lot of merrymaking, but really hard to navigate if you're a caregiver of a loved one with dementia. So we'll talk to two caregivers who have created some supports in Seashelt, in fact, and written a book as well. And we'd like to hear from you. What are the supports that you need as a caregiver with a loved one with dementia? And how do you navigate the holidays? What would you like to share with others? What should they know about helping you out during this time of year? We'll take your calls coming up after the CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Charges have been laid more than a decade after one of the largest environmental disasters in BC's history. Imperial Metals Corporation is facing 15 charges under the Federal Fisheries Act in relation to the tailings pond collapse at the Mount Holly mine in 2014, which spilled more than 20 million cubic meters of waste into waterways in BC's interior. A statement from Imperial Metals says the company received the indictment this week and it would not be commenting further. An 8-year-old child has been killed after the SUV they were in collided with a snowplow near Castlegar. Police say a pedestrian was also left with life-changing injuries when he was hit by the SUV after it spun away from the crash on Saturday. Road conditions were described as cold and icy with freezing rain. And a BC-based fuel refinery says it's found a way to significantly reduce the carbon footprint of air travel. Parkland says its Burnaby refinery is the first in the country to create low-carbon aviation fuel. The company says it has produced 100,000 liters of low-carbon jet fuel by using canola oil and tallow, and it's been purchased by Air Canada. And now the forecast on the north coast. Cloudy this afternoon with a high of 5, highs around -8 and clearing in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly cloudy with a high of -3, highs around 0 and cloudy this afternoon in the Kootenays, some sunshine at higher elevations. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a high of 0 with a mix of sun and cloud, and mainly cloudy this afternoon in Greater Victoria, a bit of sunshine in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley with highs around 7. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. He'll be back on air in about half an hour from now. And of course, lots more to come on CBC Radio 1. Here's what's coming up on the Coast.
Hi, Michelle. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I wanted to flag a few things we've got lined up for On the Coast this afternoon. You know, we've got a bit of a follow-up to the numbers that were released yesterday about toxic drug deaths in this province. There's a new report that has found that more people with chronic conditions are dying from stimulant drug poisoning than opioid drug poisoning. So we'll learn more about that. And, you know, sometimes our big holiday plans just don't work out as planned. But when things go wrong, you might as well get a good story out of it. We're going to speak to the editor of a book of such stories coming up this afternoon between 3 and 6. I hope you can join us for On the Coast.
Well, we are just weeks away from Christmas Eve and holiday preparations are in full swing. It's a joyful season for so many, but it can also be a difficult time for others, in particular those who are caring for loved ones with dementia and memory loss. We'll speak with two caregivers about their experiences and how you can find support in a moment. We'd like to hear from you as well. Are you a caregiver yourself? What supports do people with dementia and their families need during the holiday season? What helps you to navigate this season? You can call us 1 800 825 5950 604 669 3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your phone, or you can email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now are Rosella Leslie, author of Losing Us, A Dementia Caregiver's Journey, and her partner, Brian Smith. Now, both have been caregivers themselves. They now run a memory cafe in Seashelt, and we'll hear more about that in a moment, too. Thank you so much for joining us, Rosella and Brian. Really good to talk to you.
Thank you for having us.
It's nice to have you both, and you're sitting right next to each other. Thank you for welcoming us into your home in Seashelt. Rosella, you wrote a book about it, so let's start with you. Tell us about your journey as a caregiver and why you wanted to write a book about it.
Well, when I first, when my husband was first diagnosed with dementia, I was terrified. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about dementia. I didn't know anything about the journey that was ahead of me, and I was afraid to let anybody know that he had dementia because I was afraid they'd start looking at him differently. And so I kept it to ourselves for many years and tried to navigate the whole process myself. But as his cognitive abilities decreased, my duties to looking after him became more and more, and so were the frustrations and everything, and it gradually began to affect my health because I wasn't getting any help, and then I got sick and out of stress and ended up realizing I needed help. So I reached out to the community and found a support group and found that there was plenty of help available in the community that I didn't know about. I found out all about dementia through the Alzheimer's Society, and it was just, I just found it was all available. And
How did
it
that
actually
feel?
saved my, oh, it felt as if some of the burden was lifted from my shoulders because I was carrying it all by myself, and you can't do this job by yourself. I've learned that. I learned that the hard way, and otherwise your health will go or something will go. But anyway, everybody helped me, and through support groups and counseling and community programs available to like the adult day program and Minds in Motion, we were able to, some of the burden was lifted, and we survived this journey, or I survived the journey, unfortunately. And when I was finished, I wanted to help other caregivers that were starting out, so they didn't start out like me, where I was even afraid to go online about it in case somebody found out that I was online about talking about dementia. So,
Really?
and there is no need for that. There's lots of help available, and I wanted to let people know what help that was and how they could access it. And so I wrote the book about my experiences, plus also included the resources that are available.
Wonderful.
And
And Brian, you were caring for your wife, and now you're a couple because you found support in each other following that experience. Did you experience the same thing where you were hesitant to seek help?
No, I wouldn't say I was hesitant. I did reach out fairly quickly, and getting a diagnosis for my wife. But finding that there were supports available in the community was certainly extremely helpful. The Alzheimer's Society actually ran quite a few sessions here on the Sunshine Coast, and I found that very supportive.
And can you tell me a little bit more about the support you found in each other, Brian?
You mean the two of us?
Yeah, sitting next to each other now.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. We've known each other for years now, of course, because we've been actively involved in the support group and other activities.
Mm.
But there was never any kind of a romantic relationship there. It just sort of happened, and fortunately.
And Rosella?
Yes, it was really a strange thing because we were both going to support groups and going to Memory Cafe and both advocating for caregivers and working together. But it wasn't until our partners were both in care that we were meeting with a couple of other caregivers and having a night out or something just to this was during COVID and so kind of lift our spirits. And all of a sudden, Brian and I realized we had a connection, and we were.
If you have to grab a table, that's okay.
Anyway, sorry. So we realized that we had a connection, and all of a sudden we couldn't be apart. So it was.
And tell me about the holidays, because we are asking people to share, how they navigate the holidays. Clearly, you're helping each other out, but what are the challenges of that? A time of the year when you're supposed to be in a good mood all the time, but you have these private struggles. What is that like, and how is that for you, Rosella?
I found the holidays very, very hard, especially the more advanced the dementia became, the more difficult holidays were for me. I did not want anybody around me to stop being joyful. In fact, I kind of withdrew because I didn't want to be the damper to dampen their spirits. I was happy that everybody was having a good time, but it for one thing, a caregiver is so exhausted all the time because the demands on their time, especially in later stages, that can be 24/7. You're laying awake at night listening for the person to get up or do something, and so you never get a complete sleep. You're sleep deprived, and your whole life is centered around this person. Anything that you thought was your life has disappeared, and it's a very hard place for people to be. And so at Christmas, where it's requiring more energy, that can be even harder. Some of the things that help during Christmas, because people like to visit during Christmas and like to help. They want to help. And so I found that if people listened to me without judging or without suggesting, sometimes I just needed to vent, and to be able to talk to somebody without having judgment was helpful. I found that it was really nice if somebody consulted me before they came, especially if they were bringing others with them, because for a person with dementia, they thrive on routines and on quiet and on calm. And when you introduce a whole bunch of new people, that's really hard on them, and it's hard on them to pay attention, and they're usually behave sometimes very rational and can be the life of the party, but it takes its toll on them. And when everybody goes away, they're exhausted. And sometimes they're grumpy, and sometimes they go to bed and sleep for a day. Sometimes they hallucinate. And it's the caregiver that has to cope with this and do double time to make up for. And that's not to say don't visit, because caregivers are lonely. They want you to visit. They want to see the grandkids. It's just if you can do it in a way that you limit the numbers, you limit the commotion, try to have no loud music or noise in the background, try to, one or two people at a time. And that's very, very helpful.
This is really helpful advice, I think, for anyone wondering, how they can visit their relatives and what are the parameters there. So consult ahead. Put a limit on number of people, on noise, and know that you are perhaps it's going to be a drain. That visit is going to be a drain for your loved one with dementia, and subsequently for their caregiver as well. How did you find the holidays yourself, Brian? What helped you?
Having family around certainly helped.
Right, you still want them to visit, yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the norm.
Right.
To have family
Right.
around at Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I didn't. The thing is, someone with dementia, their whole outlook on life narrows considerably, and they aren't really able to cope with a lot of secondary activities.
Mm-hmm. So does it help you to see people beyond kind of what you're, as you say, bring some normality back to your life?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure, for the caregiver.
I know we have listeners who could very well be in this situation right now, or caregivers who have loved ones with dementia. Let us know. I'm sure you're listening and listening for the advice and the resources that Rosella and Brian are sharing. But if you'd like to call us and share your experience and what you think are the supports that are needed, and what you would like other people to know when it comes to navigating the holidays, you can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. And Rosella Leslie is author of Losing Us, A Dementia Caregiver's Journey. And Brian Smith joins us as well. They're partners. They have been caregivers themselves, and they now run a memory cafe in Sechelt. Tell me about that as another source of support, Rosella. What have you started here?
Well, we actually started it as a result of an Alzheimer's Society support group way back about 8 years ago. And we wanted more programs where we could socialize, because socializing for couples when one of them has dementia is really difficult. It's for the caregiver, because they're worrying about, the person saying something inappropriate or, acting up. And for the person with dementia, they go into a group of, and they can't keep up with the conversations. We normally change conversations 2 or 3 times in a few minutes, whereas they're still on the first conversation, and it's very difficult for them. So we wanted to get groups together where we could talk together and be together, and everybody understood. So you didn't have to make explanations. You didn't have to worry if your person wasn't acting completely normal, and everything was slowed down. And so we got together, and with a bunch of others, we all said, well, let's have a group together. And we just started by renting space in a church, and we hired somebody to come and do a light exercise program. And so we'd have an hour of light exercise and an hour of socializing, and we'd have cookies and coffee and games, and it ended up in lots of laughter, and we became like a family. And it's still going on 8 years later.
Wow.
And everybody loves it for that very reason, that we can join together, have fun, and nobody has to do any explaining or anything. It's and every other week now we have a sing along. We have a lady comes and does brings her guitar, and we had that today. We were singing Christmas carols today, and
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, and each group memory cafe starts with an hour of seated yoga. We have a beautiful seated yoga
Yeah.
instructor that has everybody mellow. By the time they come for the socializing, they're all just so relaxed.
That's very good. Now, as we wrap up here, perhaps you can share some of the resources and supports that you think people ought to look up. And I know you mentioned the Alzheimer's Society as well. Go ahead, Rosella.
Yes, thank you. There's the Family Caregivers of BC. They've got a caregiver support line, and they've also got a website, BC Alzheimer's Society support line, BC's First Link Dementia Helpline, and the 811 Health Link BC. There's also a site called tipasnow.com, and she's a wonderful resource for caregivers. She's funny, and she gives you lots of advice on helping to caregive.
How do you spell that?
Teepa Snow is TEEPA snow, just as in the snow that's falling.
Okay.
And if you just put them together, teepasnow.com, you'll come upon her.
Okay.
And there's a book by Lucy Hone called Resilient Grieving that is really as good as well.
And your book, of course, is Losing Us, a Dementia Caregiver's Journey. And some of the resources that Rosella just shared there are the Family Caregivers of BC, the Alzheimer's Society of BC, First Link for dementia support as well. Okay. Thank you so much to both of you. It's really a critical and very valuable support that you provide, and information that you provide as well for people going through this. Thank you so much for your time. All the best to you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Goodbye, Brian. That is Rosella Leslie, author of Losing Us, a Dementia Caregiver's Journey. And Rosella is an author, also has been a caregiver, along with Brian Smith, her partner. They both run a weekly memory cafe at the Seashell Senior Center. Again, that's the Alzheimer's Society of BC, the Family Caregivers of BC, First Link for dementia support, and Tipa Snow as well was someone that they raised as giving more information for people who are caregivers. We asked you earlier in the program for your thoughts on the GST holiday, a so-called GST holiday that the Liberal government is bringing in starting December 14th, will go until February 15th. And these will apply, this break on the GST will apply to items like prepared foods and snacks, restaurant meals, children's toys and clothes, car seats and diapers, books, print newspapers, and puzzles, and along with Christmas trees. So if you haven't gotten out your Christmas tree, that might be a time. So we asked you, is this something that would help you have big savings? Is it something that addresses affordability? Or does it just pose a fiscal headache? We've heard from small businesses who say that it poses complications and added expense for them. In fact, we heard from one business person who said it's very simple, takes about 15 minutes to make the changes on the till. But another business person who said they're still just ramping up now and will not be ready until just before on Friday night, just before the tax break comes into place. Well, we have a lot of emails. Thank you so much for sending your thoughts to bctoday@cbc.ca. Gordon writes, during the Trudeau reign of error, our national debt has doubled, and our servicing cost alone on our debt is over $50 billion. If you think the PM is thinking of you with this latest financial foolery, think again. He's trying to climb out of the deep well of political wilderness he and his minions are in. Another harebrained idea from the low-polling Liberals. Meanwhile, Scott writes from Burnaby, it's interesting to hear the Conservatives state that pausing the GST is bad, but pausing the carbon tax is good. Seems to be inconsistent. Norman writes, I see the GST holiday as the act of a very desperate politician who is fully aware that defeat awaits him in 2025. Far better and more equitable to have used whatever this maneuver is going to cost to provide help to the truly needy. Instead, it is the well-to-do, those who can afford lavish holiday spending and restaurant dining, who will most benefit. Joanne writes from Victoria, I worked in retail at BC Ferries using a point-of-sale system, and you have to go through every item that is subject to GST to change them or group change them. This is a costly exercise for businesses who don't have a straightforward finished product like restaurant or bar bills. Another Liberal move to save confidence in the government. Roberta writes, I think this is ridiculous and should be scrapped. Give the money to the households in need. Those who make less than $50,000 a year should receive a check for at least $1,000. Frank writes, hey, let's make it a permanent vacation. Goodbye, GST. Are you short of cash, government? Increase income taxes to the top 5 or 10%. Simple. And Janet writes from Richmond, I don't need a GST tax break, but I'm sure there are people who will benefit greatly. I'm thankful for the GST tax break for this reason. Good idea to have a politician on. More of this, please, as I think people need to get a greater sense of why politicians do what they do. The job is hard, and people today are far too critical, in my view, about everything. We live in a damned if you do, damned if you don't world. Thank you, Janet, for your emails, and thanks to all of you for all of your emails. One more here from Antonio, who writes, I fear this tax holiday will signal to businesses that consumers have a bit more disposable income and cause them to ready exempt consumer goods, and thus they will end up capturing the difference rather than these funds going to government where they can benefit the public good. This holiday will end up being another way that low and middle income people end up passing on their income to corporations and the upper income earners. Antonio, thanks so much for that last minute email. bc@cbc.ca is our email address. Keep them coming. Your thoughts on the GST tax, on the GST holiday that starts on Saturday, December 14th and goes until February 15th. We'll continue to follow the story, of course, and see what does happen on Saturday and in the oncoming days, and see how businesses do cope with the administrative changes. So we'll continue to follow this story for you. This is BC Today. Thanks so much for joining us.